Welcome back, everybody. We're going to talk about Week 2 DraftKings Mainslate Showdown. I'm AndrewDFS. I'm a correspondent with FFMetrics. And if you like our content, know our site or whatever, just go to FFmetrics.com. You can pull all the rankings that our brilliant RC Fisher calculates based off of his scouting and contrarian / Moneyball take that he does every week. So the site, ffmetrics.com, his Twitter at FFmetrics, and the main Twitch handle is also FFmetrics. So what we wanted to talk about today was to just dive in and talk and go through some of the Week 2 lines, which I have to the right of me, and we'll go game by game, and then we'll go into the DraftKings site to just talk about lineup stack strategies and plays that I think might be valuable that for this coming week. So first game we have on the slate, Chargers at Titans. We get the over-under on that's 45.5, which is a mid-sized game. You have the LA team who was on the road going on the road from a West Coast team, and from the West Coast, and now they have a 10 o'clock starting time, which is going to be a little more challenging. So not sure if you're going to get the best version of the Chargers coming out. Then we have Packers at Falcons with an over-under of 40.5. I think that one makes sense. Bet under on all the Falcons games because they don't like to pass the ball. If they had it their way, they'd run every single play, which, you could still use from a fantasy perspective, just probably not play their pass catchers or opposing QB. Colts at Texans, this one's interesting. 39.5, low over under, but I think that one has some potential for specifically if you're looking for a contrarian play this week. Then Seahawks Lions, the over under there actually dropped from 51 to 47, which is really interesting. I think that has to do a lot with the Seattle tackles that are going to be out. Last year, this exact game when Seattle traveled to Detroit, it was a huge fantasy shootout. So I think a lot of people are going to be harping on that, thinking that they're going to get the same result. Detroit D is better. Seattle offensive line is worse than what it was last year. So we might not get that shootout that we got last year. So we'll talk about that a little more. Then we got Bears going into Tampa, over under there 41.5. Tampa's favored by 2.5. I think that's an overreaction to the public by just the Bears losing really badly to Packers and Buccaneers pulling off the upset victory against Minnesota. I think the Bears will be just fine in that spot. So it's good news for Fields and company. Probably wouldn't want to play too many people on the Tampa side. Raiders at Bills. Raiders coming off of their impressive Week 1 victory against Denver. Bills obviously got embarrassed on Monday night, so this is sort of a bounce back game for them. Over under there is 46.5, so definitely some assets we can use there. Chiefs at Jaguars. I think this one is the highest over under. So we have Kansas City losing their first game, their season opener against Detroit. I think they'll get Kelsey back. They're traveling into Florida, but this time of the year, Florida could be really hot, so it's kind of harder for these cold weather teams to just go in there and light it up. But if you get Kelsey back, Mahomes and Kelsey is never something you want to ignore in fantasy, no matter what. Ravens at Bengals. Bengals got blanked in their opener against the Browns, and a lot of that had to do with weather. So this could be a spot where Joe Burrow comes out and has can have like a nice statement victory and just throw all over the field because he didn't really have his best game. If you look at Joe Burrow's worst losses in his career, I think 4 out of the 5, if you just rank it by the amount of points he lost by, that they all come from the Browns. So he just generally doesn't play the Browns well and on top of it, it was poor weather. So I wouldn't read too much into that game. Giants going into Cardinals. Obviously, Giants got waxed on Sunday night against Dallas. That Dallas D just crushed them. Cardinals D is looking not too bad. I think Gannon's doing a nice job. They held their own against the Commanders, but I think this week's going to be very telling if they can look impressive against the Giants too. I don't think that the Cardinals are going to be as a big of a pushover as everyone made them out to be. They almost got that game against Washington. 49ers at Rams. 49ers went into Pittsburgh last week. Over under there was 45 and a half. They just crushed Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh with Brock Purdy coming off his elbow injury. He looked fine. Ayuk went crazy. Now they're going into LA where the Rams exceeded everybody's expectations against Seattle. I don't know that they're going to be able to keep that up 2 weeks in a row, but I don't think you can ignore Purdy and the pass catchers in that game. Then we have the New York Jets, led by Zach Wilson, coming off their Week 1 win against the Bills, going into Dallas. Over under there's 38. Makes sense. You have two really strong defenses. And I don't want to call Dallas a weak offense. Let's call Jets not the best offense in the world. But when push comes to shove and you put a good D against Dallas, they tend to fold. And the Jets, for all that they're going to go through without Rodgers this year, they have one hell of a defense. They're top 5. You can make an argument they're the best. 49ers, Dallas, they all have top 3 defenses, top 5 defenses in this league. So anytime you're going up against a defense like that, you're in the ball game. So now we have 2 of those defenses going at each other, and that's resulting on the lowest over-under on this slate, which I think makes sense to me. And last one, Commanders walking into Denver. Sean Payton looking for his first win. Let's see if he gets it against that Commanders team. Over under there's 39. Sam Howell looked decent. Broncos didn't. So we'll see if he can keep it up on the road in a hostile environment. We'll see. So that is a quick breakdown of each game. I think now it's a good time to transition into DraftKings. So we'll walk through all of the different salaries, build up a couple lineups, and just go through a couple stacks we like. So we'll start with the stacks, and I think one of the most obvious ones that you can play here is Mahomes coming back, trying to answer that Week 1 letdown, playing him at the QB. If you wanted to stack him with Kelsey, you can, but you can already see off the bat that that's going to be a pretty expensive stack with him at 8,300 and Kelsey at 7,600. The other one that I wanted to mention that you can maybe stack Mahomes with is Pacheco. So he didn't really have the best game on Thursday night, and he's being used more in the passing game. So I could see him having a role. I can see like a situation where you stack both of them with each other. And for the bring back piece, it's hard to ignore Calvin Ridley. So that was one of the receivers we talked about in our last video. And now his price is up pretty significantly. I think last week he was at 6,500. He killed it against Indy, and now he's at 7,200. I expect this to sort of be a back and forth sort of game. So playing a bring back piece in this stack makes a lot of sense to me. On the other hand, if you don't want to stack Mahomes with a running back like Pacheco, another way you can do this and get cheaper is to play Lawrence instead. So the difference between Lawrence and Mahomes is about, let's see, Mahomes is at 8,300 and Lawrence is at 6,700. That's about $1,600 worth of salary. So basically, you want to get around 4x on that return on that play. So if you just multiply 1.6 by 4, right, you get 6.4 points. So if you're going to start Mahomes over Lawrence, you got to make sure that the difference between those two in your projections is at least 6.4, which I think there are scenarios where that happens. I'm pretty sure people have models where that would support that assumption. I don't think it's far-fetched at all. Okay. Next one I like, but could be a little bit more on the chalky side, stack-wise, is going to be Burrow coming back at $6,900 of salary and having a bounce-back game against the Ravens. The reason why I call this a chalkier stat is because Chase is slated to be the number one owned wide receiver in the slate. And if you're going to play Burrow, I mean, Chase is usually the go-to, but if you wanted to get a little more creative and say, okay, like I don't want the chalk with Chase, let's go with Higgins instead. That works too. And Higgins got 8 targets last week, so I mean, Burrow's going to feed both of them equally. So if you want a slightly cheaper option on that, I'd consider Higgins. If you want to go with Chase is the type of chalk that he's hard to fade, man. Like, he is so hard, especially against a team that's going to be missing their top corner, I think, in Marlon Humphrey. So that's a tough fade. But Higgins gives you comfort. At least if you're going to fade Chase, you have someone like Higgins who's a wide receiver 1 on most teams. So that's another option. Bring back wise, not a lot of choices I love with Baltimore. Cincy D is really deep and really freaking good. You don't really want to play too many people against them. But if you had to, the guy that really impressed me last week, just usage-wise, was Zay Flowers. So he had a bunch of targets. I think he had like 9 targets on the day. He was the leading receiver for Baltimore, and he's relatively cheap at $5,000. He's not chalky, so I would consider him in the option if you wanted to do the bring back. Now there's also a scenario where you can get unique by going Chase and Higgins like this. That's rare that this hits. It's not impossible, but it's rare for both receivers to just feast. So if you're looking at this stack where you have, let's say, you have 6,900 coming from Burrow, you have 6,400 coming from Higgins, you have 7,900 coming from Chase, you're going to need at least, to be competitive in the large pools, 4x on that, right? So you're going to need 85 points between the three, which, I mean, their stats are correlated. That is the point of stacking, but usually one receiver takes away from the other. So you're going to really hope that Burrow just goes crazy and throws all over the place. Weather might not permit that, so got to be careful and check the reports before the game. So if you're going to play Burrow, just make sure it's not raining again so you don't get into another situation like last week. So, well, in all transparency, Burrow was going to be my play last week against the Browns, but even given all of his, even given all of his transgressions against Cleveland or whatever, not being able to play well, I think Burrow's the best QB in the league, and I thought he would come out and sling it. But once I saw how bad the weather was going to look, I pulled him out of most of the lineups that I submitted. I left him in one that wasn't really meaningful, but that weather and going up against a really good D-line like Cleveland, not a good combo. Okay, let's talk about cheap stacks that I like. So the one that I think is going to be more chalky this week is Purdy along with Ayuk and Debo. So if we go to Purdy here, he's about, I think, 5,700. The Rams, I think, were fortunate that both Seattle tackles were out, and they sort of caught Seattle off guard. I think San Francisco is going to take this game pretty damn seriously. Kyle Shanahan and McVay have that rivalry going, so I don't see San Francisco snoozing on this game. So Purdy at 5,700, obviously a pretty good option. points wise. But then you have Ayuk, who last week he was $4,900 in salary and threw up close to 36 points. That is a winning lineup there. Ayuk needed to be in that winning lineup. And another person you can play is Debo, and this week he's at 5,600. He didn't have the best week, so maybe it's Debo's turn to eat in this situation. If you wanted to play both, I'd be okay with that. That's fine, especially if you're going into like a huge pool where you need to stick out. You got one entry. Bring back piece wise on this, I think that dude Puka Nuka or whatever, that's another guy for the Rams that was in winning lineups last week. He dropped 25 points off I think $3,500 of salary. That's how you win, by finding players like that. So that dude's questionable this week. The other guy that got a lot of targets was Tutu Atwell, and this week he's at 4,700. He put up 20 points last week, and I think he had 9 targets. I'm opening, for those of you not watching, I'm opening up his game log within DraftKings. He had 8 targets, 6 catches, and 119 yards. But if you take away Puka, that was 15 targets. So I think Atwell is gonna, be the main beneficiary there. San Francisco is really good against covering tight ends, so I would much rather play Tutu Atwell, especially if Puka's out, as opposed to Higbee, who might not be able to really find his way against that San Francisco D. Not saying they were able to shut down Pickens pretty good too, and Pickens is a way better receiver than Atwell, but Atwell might just be the beneficiary of a bunch of targets in this game. So I think the Rams are going to be playing from behind most of the time, so you can anticipate them throwing the ball a ton. Okay, so the last cheap stack that I wanted to go over really quick was CJ Stroud. And reason why I like him is not a lot of people, actually hardly anyone, is going to play him. So he's at a, $5,200 salary. I'm seeing he's listed as questionable, so that's definitely something to monitor. I think him being indoors, going up against an Indy D that isn't all that great. This has the makings of him having a pretty decent game. You can start any one of his receivers if you're trying to get creative. And keep in mind, this isn't the lineup that I would say go with. It's just one that if you want to try to stick out, this is definitely a unique one, and I could see the logic behind it. Stroud, you can put with Tank Dell or John Mechie if you want to get really creative, or if you want some of the guys that got most of the targets last week. If we just go into Indy and Houston, so you can click that button to just get all the players from Indy or Houston. Now I'm just zoomed in on Houston. You could see here Noah Brown went on IR last week. The top 4 receivers, Collins, Woods, Mechie, Dell, all of them are less than 5,000. Mechie and Dell are both less than 4,000. I think Dell could be the beneficiary of Noah Brown's injury, so that's definitely one to monitor. And on the bring back piece, I would probably play Michael Pittman. So that was another one that we talked about last week, of stacking Anthony Richardson with either Pittman or Pierce, and Ridley on the big bring back piece, which would have been very creative. One of my bigger lineups had Pittman, and unfortunately I had Pierce instead of Pittman. I got too cute there, and that kind of screwed me over. But definitely if you had Pittman, Anthony Richardson, and Ridley, you were looking pretty good there for a good portion of that day. Okay, now before we let go of the stacks, let's just do a quick glance over the QBs just to make sure we discussed everything. So let's hit that all games button to get everyone back. Josh Allen's going to be looking for a bounce back. Definitely him and Diggs, that's a good combo too. Just keep in mind Diggs is also going to be a very chalky receiver this week too. So Maybe if you wanted to get creative there, go Allen and Kincaid. Kincaid was getting a lot of looks, and there was a lot of times where I felt like Allen was forcing the ball to Diggs, but Kincaid was like running wide open. So he looks good. Kincaid looks really freaking good. So that could be a sneaky stack. And on the bring back piece there, Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams, like now Jacoby Myers is injured. He's going to probably get all of the targets that week. You know the Raiders are going to be behind, and I don't think Buffalo has like is a world beater defense. They can certainly shut down, the some teams, but I think Garoppolo and Adams could pose a challenge to them. So when they're going up against like, if they're going up, I guess the Raiders are not the best team in the world, so you can make the argument that maybe they'll just shut the Raiders down completely. But I don't know. Buffalo's an interesting one this year. So if you wanted to go Allen and Diggs and Adams, you can do that too. So if you go Allen, Diggs, Adams, the advantage there is you offset the chalk of Diggs with Adams, because I think like only like the ownership projections for Adams is like less than 1%. Like not everybody's going to play him, and Myers is out, so I could see a reason to play him. I'd avoid Lamar. Cincy defense is really good. That's not one I want to play. Fields at Tampa, I like that one. I like Fields look for teams for in bounce back situations. Herbert at Tennessee. You have a West Coast team traveling to Tennessee. I don't love that. We talked about that. Burrow, bounce back. Lawrence, I could see just because of a shootout. They have the highest over-under, but the things that kind of scare me off there is the weather. Prescott, heck no, not against the Jets. That is a no-fly zone for me. Can't convince me to do that. Anthony Richardson, yeah, I could, but I think that Houston D is a little more stingy than people think, so I'd be careful with Anthony Richardson there. I certainly think the Texans have a better D than the Jacksonville Jaguars this year, so be careful with that. Seattle at Detroit with Goff, I don't know. That one's tough because I think that Detroit's going to look to run the ball a lot in that game. So, like, Gibbs and Montgomery might be really good options there. Daniel Jones going into Arizona, I don't love that either. He did get crushed, so it is kind of like a bounce-back game for him. But that Arizona team played the Commanders pretty damn well. So it's just a matter of like how good the coaching is with Daboll and how quickly they're able to bounce back. Last one that I'll talk about on this list, Geno Smith. Without his 2 tackles, I know that, there was that shootout last year, Seattle and Detroit. I don't see it this year. I'd be really careful to start Geno. I could see why you would want to do that, but the Detroit defense is better, and Seattle offensive line is missing pieces, so I'd think twice before doing it. Okay, running back wise, we can the running back that I like this week that is really chalky, so we're talking over 30%, unfortunately, is Rachaad White. He's going up against Chicago, who let Aaron Jones just go bananas, so a lot of people want to play him, and he's cheap, getting RB1 usage. He did not put up RB1 numbers, but he was certainly used that way, so he is pretty he's gonna have a high ownership percentage, but that's the type of chalk that I wouldn't fade. So I don't like playing chalk at receivers, but I'm more comfortable playing chalk at running back. But I think that Rachaad White, as much as I love him, it's a little hard for me to play him when 30% of the pool might be doing the same thing. I'd rather just gamble and hope he doesn't go off, but when he does, I'm going to be banging my head against the wall. It's that kind of situation. My contrarian inside of me is coming out. So other running backs I like this week, James Cook up here. 6,100. So his salary is going up, and I think that's why a lot of people are getting scared. But he's on the field. His usage is there. The only problem is Allen isn't the type of receiver to like dink and dunk. He's always going for the home run. Hopefully he learned his lesson last week and does better. So there's that. But I like him because he has the usage, and people are a little scared off of his salary. 6,100 to 5,500, play him. Like, who cares? $600. I mean, if that means I get unique, I'll pay up to get a little unique in that situation. Another one that I like a lot is either Algier, or you could even go Cordero Patterson, who's expected to make a comeback as well. Which here, let's see how cheap he is. Yeah, he's at 4,500 salary. So you can play either or in this situation. Algier got 15 carries last week. He was the lead back for Atlanta. Bijan's at 7,900. He's the most expensive Atlanta running back going up against Green Bay. So Green Bay D is not terrible, but Atlanta has a strong offensive line, and they're going to run the heck out of the ball. If Arthur Smith had it his way, he would run every single play of the game. Trust me, that is exactly what he wants to do every single game. So the problem is here, you have 3 running backs. If you're going to play any of them, I would probably avoid Bijan, because at 8,000, you're going to need him to throw up 32 points, basically. Or you can just go with a CP or Algier, who they're all going to get carries. They're all going to get touches. And I think it's going to be equal across the board. So if you want to go Algier, because he had the most points last week, and his price is not reflective of that, right? At 5,500, I think that last week he was like low fives as well. Let's pull it up. Let's see how much he was last week. He was 5,400 last week. So the kid had 2 touchdowns, 75 yards, 15 carries. At times when he was running, he looked just as explosive as Bijan. Like, yeah, I'd rather play Algier than Bijan given the price, because their usage is almost identical. And then we talked about Pacheco as well. I like Pacheco in this game. I think that especially if Kelsey's still like coming back slowly, I could see him having a good day against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, yeah, they have the, if you're watching the screen and not listening on just audio, you could have seen that Pacheco, the Jacksonville Jaguars, are the second ranked run defense. No, they're not. Indy just doesn't have running backs. That's all it was. That's why that's why this looks like a bad matchup when it really isn't. Other ones that I like here, A.J. Dillon, especially if Aaron Jones is out against an Atlanta defense that I think feasted off Bryce Young. I don't know that Jordan Love is all that great, even though his stat line definitely says otherwise. But A.J. Dillon at 5,900, you're going to get RB1 usage for less than $6,000. Great, but just know that they'll probably be chalky. The ownership projections don't reflect it at this moment, but I think once like A.J. Dillon's like officially ruled out, it's definitely going to show up there. Gibbs at 6,300. I think they're going to start using him more. I like it, especially against a Seattle team that cannot stop the run. They let freaking Kyren Williams like go crazy on them. So yeah, Kyren Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, not in the same ball league. And then also, again, this is like another Bijan and Algier situation. Montgomery got most of the run there. Now, in contrast to Atlanta, I think Detroit's actually going to push Gibbs more and more as the season goes. With Atlanta, I feel like it's going to be a pretty steady, like 10 carries Bijan, 10 carries Algier, maybe 5 for CP, and then all of them get peppered with some pass targets on short swing passes. I think if they're going to run 25 to 30 times a game, if you extrapolate that out, like that is running quite a bit over the course of 17 games. That's the sort of breakout you'll see. So with Gibbs and Montgomery, I could see more work for Gibbs down the line. I don't think they're going to like try to keep that even throughout, or maybe they will try to keep it even, but Gibbs got maybe 10 to 25% of the snaps, I think, last week, or in that season opener. Montgomery clearly outsnapped him. So that's another option as well. Okay. Now let's talk about tight ends. So tight end wise, starting from the top, you have Kelsey and Andrews at 7,600 and 6,300. They're really freaking expensive, and for good reason. They can throw up a lot of points, but with Kelsey coming off of his injury, I want to give it a week before I fire up a Mahomes stack with him in it. I'd be cautious about it, but he's not going to be a popular play if you want to take that risk, and the potential there. They can easily each go off for 30 points. I don't know if Andrews is going to be ready to go either, so I'd be careful with that. Darren Waller's an interesting one at 5,500. He's a little bit rich for my taste at tight end. I usually like going in the 4s to 3s. That's where I like to play my tight end. But with the way that Giants lost, they can look for a statement victory. Just a little nervous of Gagnon's defense in Arizona. I don't think they're pushovers. So we'll see. It's going to be the battle of a young defensive mind in Gannon against Brian Daboll. So interesting. Ingram's another one that I usually really enjoy playing. Kittle's another one that you can consider as well, especially in Purdy stacks. I like both of them. So I'm liking these expensive tight ends this week, which is making me a little nervous. I can make an argument for a lot of them. The chalkiest play is going to be Musgrave down here, Luke Musgrave, and I think that's due to not only Aaron Jones being out, but I think Christian Watson's looking like he's not going to play either. So Aaron Jones was a very big focal point of that offense, and last week Musgrave had a lot of the targets. He's priced at had a healthy amount of targets, I should say, for his price range. At 3,200, doesn't really get much cheaper than that, but just know he's going to be chalky. One chalky, not so chalky play I like at that same price range is Chigunkonkwo. And reason why I like him, I think that he got a little bit muted by the Saints D. Saints D is really good, so I would try to throw all the Titans' offensive output down the drain. And on top of it, Hopkins is questionable as well, so maybe Chig's going to have a much bigger day in the pass game. So he blanked last week. Totally get it if you want to avoid it, but sort of when you're in this 3,000 to 4,000 range, you live and die by the salary, so you got to be a little careful. Dalton Kincaid's also down here. We talked about him, 3,300. I mean, you don't need much from him. Just do the 4x math there. You need 12 points. That's pretty much his last week plus a touchdown. It's not difficult for him to do that. He could easily grab 6 balls, 60 yards and a touchdown, and then you really maximize your ROI for that tight end position. So that's why I like playing tight ends at this salary, because literally if you get a touchdown out of these guys, they provide you with really great ROI. And if they don't do it, and chances are you look at the highest tight end last week. Let's just sort off the slate. The tight end that scored the most out of all the tight ends in the slate is Darnold Parham from last year. From last week. I don't think he's going to do that again, but 11.1 points. That is the ceiling out of everyone that played. And granted, Andrews and Kelsey didn't play. I know they're going to play this week too. But if Kelsey scores 17, that is not worth $8,000. Trust me, that is really bad ROI. So you're going to need Kelsey to go crazy in his first game. But you could see here, this is why it's good to go cheap. Would you rather get 9.9 points out of Ingram at 4,800, or go with the $3,000 guy? And it's the matter of just look at the top 5 here, right, and look at all of their salaries. If you just average it out, they're the top scorers of this slate, their average salary is in the mid 3s, mid to high 3s. So That's how you can think about it. It's not going to hold up, but I'm just trying to tell you that tight ends don't score a lot. That's the moral of the story. So you want to just bite the bullet, hope your guy catches a touchdown. That's how I usually think about it when I put my lineup together for DFS, and try to stack him with your quarterback, and hope that you can double dip there. Okay, last position we'll talk about, and then we'll move into chalky players and not so chalky players. So that's a sort of newer segment that I'm trying to incorporate, and then we'll call it a wrap. So if we go down the list here for defenses, the chalkiest play of the week is going to be the Buccaneers at 3,200. I don't understand it. First of all, that's a lot to pay for a defense, and I guess like it's a little rich for my taste, I should say. Like I like going under 3, so it's not terrible, but I think a lot of people are thinking that Justin Fields isn't it. Like he didn't show up in his week 1, but you know what? Like you can, I would give him another week. Like he was pretty prolific last year. Tampa's missing Carlton Davis. Like I don't know that I would really I don't really understand why that one particularly would be the chalkiest play. Most expensive plays up here, you have 49ers at 4,100, Cowboys at 4,000. Like that's pretty expensive. And Dallas, they backed it up last week. 37 points out of a D. That is a game changer in DFS. Like that type of salary, like just do the quick math in your head. That's like 9x. That is unreal return. Problem is, I don't think they're going to do that every week. And I know they have a pretty juicy matchup with Zach Wilson. But just keep in mind that he's a mobile quarterback. So mobile QBs can, evade the sack or whatnot. He is turnover prone. It's possible. It's possible that Dallas D does come to life here. But time and time again, you just see this Dallas team in a game that's a quote-unquote, like, gimme. And they just do something to mess it up. Like, they're coming off, they're, like, on their high horses. They crush their divisional opponent 40-0. I'm not saying they're going to lose. I've just seen this Dallas team under McCarthy, like, not do what they're supposed to and just kick their opponent's ass. So, for that reason, I don't know that I'd be comfortable going 4,000 with them this time around. Just scrolling down the list, I would definitely avoid the Broncos. I don't think that they're all that great. They're priced really high, and they're probably not even going to be played too much. Like, I wouldn't even call it a contrarian play. I would just avoid it. Giants, yeah, I mean, that's another one that's a little high that I wouldn't touch. Let's talk about ones that I do like. So, defenses I like this week. So, I tend to focus, unless there's just like something so juicy up here, I tend to look at 3,000 and lower. So, starting out, Lions at 3,000. It's not the worst because both tackles are out. The thing that freaks me out with the Lions is that Seattle's going to be desperate here. So that makes me a little nervous. And Lions are sort of coming off a big win. So you sort of add those two elements together. Freaks me out, but I could totally see it. I could see why you would want to play that. And especially if you want to stack that with a Gibbs or a Montgomery play. For Falcons, I'd be comfortable playing that. I think they can force. So you have A.J. Dillon out. You have Christian Watson out. The Falcons D, when they're going up against a bad team, they tend to take. They look like they'll be able to take advantage this year. Jesse Bates forced 3 turnovers. A.J. Terrell could probably lock down Romeo Doubs. So I think that this is a pretty favorable matchup for the Falcons D. So if you want to go Falcons D plus CPAT or Algier, that's a fine stack in my opinion. That's a good one. Seahawks, I don't think I would want to play their D in Detroit. I would try to avoid Amon-Ra St. Brown though, because he's going to be going up against Tariq Woolen. So that's definitely a matchup that scares me a little bit. And on the other wide receiver matchups that are really scary, that Dallas Jets game has two of them. You have CeeDee Lamb going up against Sauce, and then you also have Garrett Wilson going up against Trayvon Diggs and the Dallas secondary. So both of those I would definitely avoid, and I think a lot of players are actually avoiding them in DFS. I mean, Wilson obviously has the Zach Wilson handicap, and everybody respects Sauce, so no, I don't think a lot of people are going to play Lamb. Now, the defense that I like here are the Jets. So, Jets, they're at 2,700. I think they have one of the best. When you talk about Dallas, San Francisco, and Jets, I think those are the three best defenses in the NFL this year. And you get them at 2,700. Going up against Prescott, who, let's face it, he wasn't really playing in a tight game. When the game's tight, game's on the line, I don't know how good he's going to play. So I'd be excited to play the Jets more than I would be excited to play the Cowboys, just because the Cowboys are $4,000. Like that is really expensive. But again, if they throw it up, they put up 37 for $4,000. That is freaking amazing. It's incredible. It's better than Ayuk. Ayuk put up 36 points for 4,900 last week. So think about that. So if a defense scores 30, you better hope that the rest of your team hit, because that's a rare thing to do, and you definitely want to take advantage of it from a DFS perspective. Cheap one that I like is the Titans D against the Chargers. Reason why I like that, you have Chargers traveling from west to east. They're probably going to be missing Eckler, who is arguably their best playmaker. Titans are coming off a loss. Vrabel as a home underdog. I think this is a situation where if you wanted to go Henry plus Chargers D, I'd be okay with that. That is, Henry plus Titans D. I think that's a great stack. I think they can feed off each other. Again, running backs and defenses are positively correlated, because if the defenses are, just jumping up, coming up on a good lead or whatever, then that means the running back's probably churning out the clock and running the ball a lot. Okay. That's it lineup wise. But what I also wanted to talk to you all about is the chalkiness. So we talked about Chase and Diggs being super chalky. The next guy that's chalky is Rachaad White. I'd be okay playing Chase or Diggs and even White, but just keep in mind, you're not going to be able to distinguish yourself in a pool. With Chase, I would be very careful and just monitor the weather before you play it. If it's raining, I would avoid it and just let other people take that risk. Let 33% of your pool take it. Diggs, there's the risk that Buffalo climbs on top of the Raiders and they're running the ball out with and maybe becomes more of a Cook day, or maybe Allen's just I'm not going to just take deep shots to Diggs. Diggs enough, stop going crazy on the sideline. I'm just going to I don't know if he's actually going to do that, but maybe he'll look at other receivers in that game. Amon-Ra St. Brown is also above a 20% ownership projection. He's going up against Tariq Woolen. I don't like that matchup. I also think that Detroit's going to really try to run the ball against Seattle. I think Dan Campbell saw what happened to Carroll's defense last week and probably licking his chops to get Montgomery and Gibbs a lot of carries there. Ayuk and Debo are also going to be chalky. So why are you chalky? Why does that happen? Chalkiness occurs under two situations. One, you think the player is going to explode. And two, is it a salary thing? Are you mispriced? And sometimes they interact with each other. You think the player is going to explode like an Ayuk, and he's cheap. Ayuk's $5,800. That's $2,000 less than Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think Ayuk's probably going to outscore or be on the same level as Amon-Ra St. Brown. So that's sort of the reason why DFS players are sort of playing Ayuk. So I'd be careful with that. Ayuk and Samuel are both going to be highly owned, but I would trust both of them. I would not fade the chalk here. The chalk I would fade, I'd fade Christian Kirk. Reason why people are going to be playing him this week is his cheap salary at 5,100. I think a lot of people are thinking that maybe Ridley target, those targets against Indy were a one-time thing. It's a fluke, and maybe Casey's going to cover Ridley and not let Lawrence go there. Personally, I wouldn't take that gamble. Kirk looks like he's an afterthought in this passing game, so until you prove otherwise, I'm not going to drop my money on him. Tony Pollard's another one at 7,400. That's pretty close to a 20% ownership projection. Yeah, that's one I would fade. I do not love that Jets matchup, and I think that can be a pretty low-scoring game, as that over-under implies as well. So that game could easily end up being like a I don't know, like a 17-14 type of game, like, or even like 17-13. I don't want any part of that game. Josh Kelly and AJ Dillon, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about those guys. And reason why is Kelly's probably going to replace Eckler. He's doubtful right now in the game against the Titans. Titans have a pretty good run D, so I'd be careful starting Kelly there. And usually when you have situations of players like coming out last minute, like an Eckler or like a Dillon, those players are not priced in DraftKings for RB1 usage, so they end up being very chalky. I would rather play AJ Dillon over Kelly, even though I actually like Kelly's skills more than AJ Dillon. And reason for that is I would rather take a chance against the Atlanta D being frauds and versus relying on the Chargers traveling to an East Coast time zone where we've seen time and time again, like they just let down in those spots, and you're going up against a pretty desperate Titans team. So I'd be careful with that. Chalkiest quarterback this week is going to be Anthony Richardson. Again, it's not because people think he's going to score the most. He's pretty cheap, and people saw that he threw up 20 points pretty easily last week, so they're going to be looking for him to do the same thing there again. So I think last week he was at 5,600. He might be at 6,000 now, which is, yeah, there he is, 6,300. That's a little much for me for a rookie quarterback going on the road against the defense that I think is going to be better than what a lot more people in the public think. And then chalkiest tight end of the week is Musgrave. Reason why people like him, we talked about him already, but 3,200, that's pretty damn cheap. You have Watson and Dillon out, so there's Musgrave down there. And maybe Atlanta's going to choke and let him run wild, so that's what people are harping on. I would rather go with another cheap tight end. I'm not married. Like, I think that Okonkwo, Kincaid, they're all equally likely to hit compared to Musgrave. So I'd rather let someone else take Musgrave and get Kincaid and hope that Allen throws him a touchdown, which he was pretty damn, like, I really thought he was going to get one on Monday night, and I'm kind of happy he didn't, so that maybe Allen says, okay, let's try to feed this kid. Last thing before we wrap up are the not so chalky players, so I'll flip back to the full slate, and what I wanted to talk about there, Adams and Josh Jacobs, they're not really highly owned here, and you have Jacoby Myers that's not playing, so I think that's good for Adams. The Buffalo defense is not designed to cover running backs. They were sort of the architecture behind that Buffalo D was to slow down KC, so they have trouble against top running backs, and you saw that Monday night when Breece Hall just gashed them up the middle. Like I think he had like 2 carries for 100 yards at one point. So I'd definitely look into Josh Jacobs. Not highly owned at all. He's a great play. And the other play that isn't chalky is Derrick Henry. So if you want to go Derrick Henry and Tennessee defense, I think this is a spot where Henry can like go off like 200 rushing yards or something like that. So those are the plays. That pretty much wraps it up for this week. Again, my name is AndrewDFS. If you like this content, subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to FFMetrics. I'm a correspondent with that site where RC Fisher, brilliant scout, dives into all the game tape, looks through all the stats every single week, puts together amazing reports, game reports, projections, you name it, he's got it. Definitely a site that you want to use. FFmetrics.com, Twitter handle at FFmetrics, and we also have a main Twitch channel for that site, FFmetrics. So follow us on Twitter, like and subscribe. Really appreciate all you guys. Best of luck on all your betting ventures for this week, and we are out.